Fantastic. Morning, everyone. I'm Jim. Dominique. Few moments. It's good to see you all at church this morning. As Kieran said, we started this new series last weekend, Life Where's the Pause Button? And Kieran spoke just brilliantly last week about how do we find peace in an anxious world? How do we find peace in a world which is just full of anxiety? And I just want to recommend that message to you. If you haven't heard it, have a look on YouTube or listen to it on iTunes. It'd be great to catch up on that. Today we're going to be looking at the subject of contentment. How do we find contentment in a world of more? How do we find contentment in a world that constantly tells us that our lives are not enough, that we don't have enough, that we need more, that we need new, that we need the next thing? Contentment, according to the dictionary's definition, is this: it's a state of happiness and satisfaction. A state of happiness and satisfaction. There's a word in the Bible, actually, a Hebrew word called shalom, and shalom has this sense of peace and harmony and wholeness and completeness. But contentment is being at peace with your present circumstances and situation, whatever the state of affairs that is going on. How do we find contentment in a world that constantly tells us that actually we don't have enough? A world that actually tells us all the time that we need more or need new. That's what we're going to be looking at. Because our lives can actually sometimes feel like this endless pursuit of trying to find contentment in life. Whether that's in material things and money and possessions, or whether that's in work or relationships or experiences, we can spend our life chasing after this thing called contentment and realize a year has gone, or 5 years have gone, or 25 years have gone, and we still feel like we're chasing after something, but not finding a contentment in the now, in the moment, in today. What does it mean to be content? How can we discover contentment? In the Bible, in the book of Proverbs, there's a verse in Proverbs chapter 14, verse 30 that says this: a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. A heart at peace gives life, but envy kind of rots at who you are. Envy, which is actually the heart of discontentment, rots the bones. Envy, if you look at the dictionary definition of that, says that envy is a feeling of being discontented or a resentful longing aroused by someone else's possessions, qualities, or luck. Envy is feeling discontented with where you are at because you're looking at where someone else is at, what job they're in, or what relationship they're in, or what house they live in, or what possessions they have, or what holiday they've been on, and you feel envious, and that leads to a sense of discontentment. Envy actually is the opposite to contentment in that sense. Envy is feeling like I want someone else's life. I'm not satisfied with my own. And we can spend our lives comparing ourselves to other people and their circumstances and their situations and feeling discontent about our own. And in that place, it's actually quite exhausting. A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. In the Bible, there's a guy called the Apostle Paul, and he says something pretty profound in Philippians chapter 4, kind of like our core verses for this morning. You may want to turn there. Paul writes to a church in Philippi. Paul had experienced all kinds of things in his life, things that were good, position and power and authority. He'd experienced being shipwrecked and being beaten and being imprisoned and being misunderstood. He had times when he had loads, times where he had nothing. But he said this in Philippians 4, chapter 4, verse 11. It says, I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstance. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. Have you? Have we learned that secret of contentment? I have a sense that today people live their lives with a constant sense, actually, of discontentment. I don't know if we've discovered this secret that Paul is talking about. How can we learn this secret? That's what we're going to be exploring today. And I think this is a huge subject and a massively important subject. And I'll tell you why. Because I think we live in a world that actually trains us to be discontent. You may not have thought about that in that way, but I think we live in a world that trains us to not be satisfied with our current state of affairs, that trains us to be discontent, because we're constantly told our life is not quite enough yet, that we need something else, we need more, we need new. The grass is always greener somewhere else. The reality is it's unrealistic and it always leads to discontentment. Just think through a number of areas of our lives. Just think about money and possessions. Maybe that's the most obvious area we think about when we think about discontentment. Do you know it's estimated that you will see every day between 4,000 and 10,000 adverts. Every single day of your life. Between 4,000 and 10,000 adverts. And what are those adverts saying? The thing that we have is going to make your life better, and so you need it. Without even knowing it, it's like background noise. There's this message going on saying your life isn't quite enough yet because there's all these other things that you need. Between 4,000 and 10,000 adverts. We need to realize that this is happening all the time, and it's a message from our culture that is saying you need more. You can have more. Your life can be better. It's subtle and sometimes not quite so subtle. Do you know, Jesus said this in Luke 12, verse 15. Watch out. He's like, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. And people wonder if the Bible has anything to say to our culture today. Jesus, 2,000 years ago, says, be careful, because you're going to be told that your life consists in what you own, and I'm telling you, it doesn't. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. We need to hear how sharp and radical and relevant Jesus' words are today in our culture, because we're told all the time that they do. So there's money and possessions. There's one thing. It could be location, though. You could feel discontent with where you live or the house that you live in and always feel that the next house or maybe the next location, if I live somewhere else, my life would feel more content. Or maybe it's work. Maybe you're thinking, well, if I had another job, I would feel more content. It wasn't that long ago in our country where people would stay in one job or one career for their whole life. Now, the average time someone spends in a job is less than 5 years. Now, there's lots of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is we breed a culture of discontentment. If I can't pursue as quick as I want or go as far as I want, I have the impact I want, then I'll move and do something else. Or it might be relationships. You feel discontent in a relationship. That's why the affair happens, is because people feel discontent and feel, well, I need the new because this has gone stagnant. Or it may be experiences. We may spend too long looking at our holiday experience against others on Facebook, maybe even people we don't know, and we feel discontent because our experiences don't quite add up to other people's. Or maybe we feel discontent with our image. Shopping therapy is a real thing. We feel like actually if we get the new outfit, the new haircut, then actually we feel more content with ourselves, and we spend a huge amount of money on image. And all of these things can breed discontentment in our lives. Money, possessions, where we live, what we do, relationships, experiences. And we can live this life always constantly wondering, I wonder what my life would be like if I did this job, if I lived there, if I had more money, if I was in that relationship. And we can live with this sense of constant discontentment. How do we learn the secret of contentment? And all of this is actually rooted in envy. I want to be like that person. I want to have what that person has. I want. And if I had all these things, then I would be content. Then add into that some other cultural forces. So like we live in a culture of like instant gratification, fast food, faster broadband? Why would you have to wait till next week to catch up on the next box set episode? You can watch them all in one sitting, in one binge Netflix sitting. Watch them all. Order an item on Amazon today. You can get it tomorrow. All of that feeds a sense of discontentment because we're not really trained to wait for anything in our culture. And then add into that social media. We've mentioned that already, but in The Guardian in the autumn, October 2018, there was an article called The Age of Envy, How to Be Happy When Everyone Else's Life Looks Perfect. And it says, it reported this, there's been researcher looking into the impact of social media on our lives. It says we live in the age of envy, career envy, kitchen envy, children envy, food envy, upper arm envy, holiday envy, you name it, there's an envy for it. We're constantly bombarded by photoshopped lives, and that exerts a toll on us, the likes of which we have never experienced in the history of our species. One researcher said the impact of Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat said, I think what social media has done is make everyone accessible for comparison. In the past, people might have just envied their neighbors, but now we compare ourselves with everyone around the world. And this researcher said, we carry our envy amplification device around us in our pockets. We sleep with it next to our pillows, and it tempts us 24 hours a day. The moment we wake up, even if it's in the middle of the night, and it produces a sense of dissatisfaction because we think everyone else is living a fuller, happier, more exciting life than us, and it leaves us discontented. It's a massive issue for us. I read another article on the BBC News from December last year, a study into the pursuit of happiness. A professor from the University of California was so interested by the huge rise of self-help books that she thought she'd do research as to whether self-help books actually make us feel happier. Her outcome was it's completely the opposite, because the more we pursue this idealism of happiness, the more we strive after it, the more our life disappoints us when we can't quite attain to what the books say we should be like. And so it actually leads a greater sense of dissatisfaction in our lives rather than contentment. She said this, people might set high standards for their happiness. They may think they should be happy all the time or extremely happy, and that can set people up to feel disappointed with themselves, and that has self-defeating effects. She also said this, the individual pursuit of happiness has led people to feel more lonely and disconnected from community, because when we focus on ourselves, we stop thinking of others and we end up isolated from community. That is a research from self-help books. The harder we strive for happiness, the less likely we are to find it. Why am I painting all this backdrop today? I'm painting it because I think this issue of contentment is absolutely massive in 21st century Britain, and we can live our lives striving for something the world says we should have, and that is not the life God intended us to live. That is not what God created us for. We need to see these conflicting worldviews. We live in a culture that says your contentment is found in what you own, and Jesus says, no, life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. These things conflict. In another bit of the Bible, in Hebrews, it says this, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Be content with what you have. Are there any six more terrifying words for our culture than those? Be content with what you have. Why? Because God has said, I'm with you. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Don't endlessly pine for what you don't have, but cultivate satisfaction in what God has given you for today, because God's promised that he will be with us always. So how can we be content? How can we live lives in content when all of this is going on around us? Well, Dominique's going to come and share a bit of her story. So can you give my wife a huge welcome and encouragement and round of applause?
Hello, good morning everybody. It's great to see you all today. I hope that you're all good. So Jim and I were preparing. We thought it would be really good to kind of share some personal stuff. So I'm really happy to share with you some of the struggles that I've had, some of the struggles that I've had with contentment in my own life. And Paul in the Bible talked about it being a secret. And I don't know about you, I'm really keen to learn what that secret is. At times I've battled with comparison, as Jim has said. I find this really easy with social media. I dislike the part of me that when I look through Facebook, instead of celebrating people's happiness, in celebrating people's successes, I can find like this kind of cynical, critical thing happening inside of me. And I don't like that. I think it comes from a kind of an envious place in me, and I don't think it's godly. I don't like it. I want to encourage myself to celebrate others' happiness. I think in that we have a responsibility with what we put on social media as well. That we can put a varnished self, we can put a filtered self on, can't we? And I think that we have a responsibility as followers of Jesus to be real, to kind of question what we're trying to say as we put stuff up. What kind of image are we putting out there? Because otherwise, I think it can leave us feeling fake and not real ourselves. And I think it's also not helpful for people to be real with us if we've got these lives that look so perfect. I know that my life certainly isn't perfect. I want to talk to you about a comparison that I have struggled with and that I've worked through. If you want to, you guys, do you want to put up the picture of, so this is an image of Burgess Hill. I live in Burgess Hill. I've always lived in Burgess Hill. So here is an image, Pear Tree Close, the little red dot is where I grew up, where I was a baby and grew up. And now I live 3 minutes from where I grew up. And this is kind of said with a sense of frustration because I'm actually quite an adventurous person. I met Jesus when I was 19 and I felt like he was going to call me to anywhere and have big adventures with him and live in the jungles of wherever. And I'm, what desired that was up for anything. But what he asked me, what he's asked me to do is continue living in the place where I grew up 3 minutes away from. So he's, instead of saying to me, go and have adventures, he said, no, stay, be rooted, serve the people that are around you. And I've had to really wrestle with that, especially when my precious sister moved to Australia about 5 years ago and she gets to live here. So my sister lives in Australia. I went to visit her. I stayed with her for 2 weeks a couple of years ago and just had the best time ever. She lives kind of in paradise. She lives to what I think heaven will be like. We had 2 delicious weeks together, and then I came home to Burgess Hill. It was February. It was grey. It was cold, and I had to do some serious talking to God about the frustrations that I had, because how come she, who loves Jesus and follows him and wants to serve him with her family, gets to live here, and how come I have stayed in Burgess Hill? And in that, I had this kind of, I know I sound like a complete brat, like, God, I'm so sorry because I get to live here, which is very beautiful. I have food, I have water, I have shelter. I'm so sorry, God, that this sounds so pathetic that I'm talking to you about this. But I love how God longs for us to be real with him, to go to him with our doubts and with our fears and with our disappointments. So I talked to him about, God, am I not good enough to have adventures in other places? Am I not good enough? I'm not strong enough in my relationship with you. And I felt him say to me, no, of course, but you are to have adventures with me here. He doesn't change, does he? He doesn't change. He is the same God wherever we are. He is all powerful, almighty, and my hope is not to be found in my security, and my purpose and who I am at the core is not to be found in where I live. It's not even to be found in the adventures that I'm to have with him. It's to be found in him. He is to be my treasure and he is to be my joy. And I feel like he has spoken to me about that and said to me, it's not because I'm lacking anything that I don't get to have adventures with him, but I am to instead choose to be obedient to him. And also, I feel like God has spoken to me about the fact that we're only on this world, in this earth, for a little time, and one day we'll be in heaven. And I know that might sound, oh my goodness, that's really super spiritual, Dominique, but actually that is the truth. We are here just for such a limited time, and we've just got to jolly well get on and do what He's asked us to do. Like, what is the point in me being discontented and thinking, oh, I want to live where my sister lives because it's really beautiful? God has given me responsibilities and roles, and I am to be obedient in that and live the life. No one else is going to be me. You know, I've got to get on and be me rather than comparing myself to other people. And you might say to me, well, if you want to go and live on the beach, why don't you just go and do that? But I just so want to remain in God's will because that is absolutely the best thing for me. God is the only relationship. He is the only thing in my life that does me good all the time. Like I can't have enough of God. I can't overdose on Him and it be bad for me. There is no side effects with my relationship with God. He is the one thing that satisfies me. I've realised that I can't find contentment in the things that I own. I don't know about you, but sometimes I find the anticipation of receiving an Amazon parcel or the anticipation of buying a new pair of shoes is sometimes more exciting than the actual wearing of them and the getting of them and the delivery of them. I've realised that my contentment is not to be found in my self-image. I have at times in my life felt that my legs are far too short. I felt that my eyes are too close together. I now in my mid-40s have wrinkles to contend with. But I know that God has made me to be me. I think that comparison with images can be really tricky, especially with the social media. I think this is an issue not only for women, but for men as well. We are bombarded with images of what we are supposed to look like constantly. I have realised that, like I've said earlier, that I need to get on with being who God has made me to be, that I have a responsibility to look after this body that God has given me, to care for it, to exercise it sometimes, to eat well, to choose to put in stuff that is good for me. And it's okay to make the best of my appearance, but I realise that my identity is not to come from my appearance, but instead from Jesus. I have grown to love and appreciate the body that God has given me. My body works. I'm so thankful that I'm pain-free. I know that this isn't true for everybody, and there's been times in my life when I've had pain. I had to have a couple of partial discectomies with my spine, so I've had nerve pain and really wrestled with the limitations that pain can bring. But even in that, I felt like He has come alongside me and spoken to me and brought contentment during those times of limitation. I'm just going to finish with something that this really wise guy called John Piper has said. So this is a question that he has asked, and Jim read it to me a while ago, and it really resonated with me and made me really think. So let me read it to you and see what you think. So he asks this question: if you could have heaven with no sickness and with all the friends that you ever had on earth, and all the food you ever liked, and all the leisure activities you've ever enjoyed, and all the natural beauties that you ever saw, all the physical pleasures you have ever tasted, and no human conflict or any disasters, could you be satisfied with heaven if Christ was not there? I find this so challenging because a lot of what I enjoy in life is this beautiful world that He's given me, the friends that I enjoy, the friendships that I enjoy. But actually, what I want to have in the core of myself is that He is my treasure, that He is my contentment. And I'm so up for remaining soft to Him, to look to Him, because I just want Him to be my hope. No other comparison to anybody else or no other experiences. I want Him to be in my heart and my delight. Thank you, everybody.
Fantastic stuff. Jesus is our hope. He is our treasure. So how do we learn this secret of contentment? Paul says he'd learned the secret. I know what it is to have plenty. I know what it is to be in need. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. He'd learned something, a secret that he had learnt. I think is a good question to ask. Am I learning that secret? In my life, am I thinking through these things? And am I learning what it is to find my hope in Christ alone and in nothing else? Obviously, Paul had gone on a journey with that. He says elsewhere in the Bible that godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world and can take nothing out of it. This sense of if you understand who you are in God and then can live a life of contentment, this is going to be good for you. There's great gain in learning these secrets, learning these things. And Dominique's talked about Jesus. In a moment, I'm going to talk much, much more about Jesus because he is our treasure. But I do also think there's some things that we can put in practice in our lives that help teach us to learn the secret of contentment, one of which is gratitude. I think there's a hugely important biblical principle of gratitude, of being thankful for what we have, not just constantly thinking of what we do not yet have. Living thankful every day for his provision and for every sign of something that we can be grateful for. Every night when I pray with my two boys, I ask them, come on, let's think of one thing that we can thank God for today, because I want to teach them about gratitude. They say the same thing. Thank you, God, for food. That's all they, and I'm not, it's not a bad thing to be thankful for. But I'm trying to teach them to be grateful for what we have today. Will help learn the secret of contentment. Choosing gratitude in every moment helps us. I think simplicity may help us. We live in a society that has so much stuff. We need to build storage units to keep the stuff that we haven't got room to store at home, so we pay someone else to store it for us. I think there's something powerful about stripping stuff back. I watched a documentary about some Franciscan monks who lived in Bradford and served the poor. And once a year, they do a cull on everything they own. And they literally were going through their kitchen utensil drawer saying, well, why do we need 2 spatulas? We only need 1. That's perfectly fine. Someone else could benefit from this spatula. And so they gave it away because they're like, well, we don't need. Greed is actually having more than you need. And these beautiful monks were saying, well, we don't need all of these different things. We just need one of them. And yet we're so bombarded by so much. I think there's power actually in simplicity sometimes. Jesus, when he told his disciples to travel around the towns proclaiming the kingdom of heaven is near, told them to travel lightly, to go simply. I don't know if you've heard of a lady called Marie Kondo. Anyone heard of her? Okay, Marie Kondo is kind of a growing profile, internet sensation, her own Netflix show now. She's making a lot of news about the life-changing magic of tidying up. So that's her book, 3 million copies sold, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. Now, I know some of you are Monica from Friends, and this is your delight to tidy up. This is your joy. And she's making an awful lot of money by helping people tidy their houses and declutter, which is an interesting idea. She says you need to get rid of things that aren't necessary, which is ironic in a world that says more, 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 more. Now someone's making money saying less, 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 less. She has this way of doing that. She says you need to put all the things in your house into 5 categories. So clothing or books or whatever those categories are. She goes, then you pick up each item in that category and you ask yourself, does this item spark joy for me? And if the item doesn't spark joy for you, you thank it for its service to your life and you discard it. If it does spark joy for you, you keep it and then organize it. And she goes round homes helping people to do this with all their stuff. And there's some challenges with that for me because like one of the items is clothing. And I have a very, very functional relationship with clothes. So if I were to do the exercise, if I were to lift up every item of clothing and say, does this item spark joy for me? I would have no wardrobe. I would thank my socks for their service and then would have very cold feet for the rest of my life. But there's this idea of decluttering, of simplicity, of stripping stuff back. It's a huge thing that's growing. It's interesting, Jesus was talking about this stuff 2,000 years ago. Watch out. Be on your guard. against all kinds of greed, because life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. That's what Jesus has always said. In fact, Jesus said joy doesn't come at all from possessions. Joy comes from him alone. So I think we can develop the secret through gratitude, through simplicity. I also think we can develop the secret through generosity. Do you know, we were created to give away, not consume. We were created in the image of a God who is generous, extravagantly generous. It's our created DNA is not to consume, but to contribute. That's how we were made. It's only the world's values that have been imposed on us that have taught us to consume rather than to be generous. It's an interesting thing if you think about the story of Adam and Eve and creation. They had everything they needed. They had God. They had a beautiful creation. They were called to contribute with God to the creation of this paradise extending across the world. And what did they do? They consumed the thing that they looked at, that they didn't need, but that they wanted, and sin entered their world. Rather than being contributors, they became consumers. They said, that thing that we're not meant to have and isn't good for us, we want that. And so it became about what I get rather than what I give. And Jesus said it is far more blessed when you give than when you receive, because we're created to be generous. And one of the ways to say no to our culture that screams more at us is to become generous with our lives, our time, our finances, our money, our stuff, to give rather than to receive, because that is how we are made. Gratitude, simplicity, generosity, some practical ways that we can practice the secret of contentment. But ultimately, if we truly want to learn the secret of contentment, as Dominique's been sharing this morning, we have to look to Jesus. Jesus once said this in John's Gospel. He made this massive declaration. Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Bread was the staple diet of the day. You'd have bread every day. You'd have bread with every meal. It was like the essential diet in the community. These words were spoken just after Jesus had multiplied some bread to feed 5,000. And he then says, this thing that you need every day, this thing that you need to satisfy your hunger, this thing is me. I am the bread of life. Come to me and you'll never be hungry. Come to me, you'll never be thirsty. You won't be interested in all this other stuff, because I will satisfy your every need. When you're hungry, there's no point in studying a piece of bread or analyzing a piece of bread or looking at a piece of bread. You've got to eat the piece of bread. Jesus is saying, you can analyze me, look at me, study me. What you need to do is welcome me, receive me, open your life to me, and then you'll discover that I am the one who satisfies. Your contentment is found in me. Jesus ultimately is the secret to contentment. And this is what the Apostle Paul had discovered. He discovered that the gospel, the good news of Jesus, was the secret of contentment. A little bit earlier in Philippians, he'd said this. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them garbage. The actual translation is excrement, that I may gain Christ and be found in him. Why does Paul know the secret of contentment? Because he's recognized everything else the world offers is garbage compared to knowing Jesus. And when you know Jesus, you realize, I know what it is to be content in every situation, in need and in plenty. You think our contentment levels go up and down based on our circumstances. Paul's didn't. Paul stayed the same because his contentment was not rooted in his circumstances. His contentment was rooted in the knowledge of Jesus. What's your contentment rooted in? Things, circumstances, situations, possessions, work, where you live, wanting to be by a beach? Is it found in Jesus? Everything else is garbage compared to him. He alone can satisfy. We're going to pray, and we're going to take bread and wine together as a sign. As Jesus said, I am the bread of life. we're going to take this symbol, this bread, and we're going to take this grape juice, and we're going to take it as this thing that Jesus called us to do, to remember him. And I want you, as you are taking bread and wine this morning, to simply pray a simple prayer. It says, Jesus, you are enough for me. You are the bread that I need. I wonder, can we stand for a moment, band? I wonder if we can just be beautiful just to sing, turn our eyes towards Jesus. Is that okay, yes?